The Celtics stayed on the yellow brick road as they captured a clean sweep over the Indiana Pacers. The Dallas Stars pick up a 2-1 series advantage. Bill Walton of the NBA unfortunately passes away at age 71, and the worst umpire in all of Major League Baseball has finally decided to call it quits, and the baseball world rejoices. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and with me today are both of my co-hosts. First, we've got David Street.
What's up, everybody?
And secondly, we've got Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
And yes, just like I said, the Boston Celtics remained on the yellow brick road as they had possibly the easiest game of chutes and ladders to get to the NBA Finals as well. If you want to kind of compare their opponents, you could call them cupcakes because that's just how easy and almost tasty it was for the Celtics to get where they are. But don't want to undermine the Celtics because the Celtics are a great team. They deserve to be there. And, well, they were kind of favored to be there in a really lackluster Eastern Conference division. So, conference, I should say. So here they are, clean sweep of the Indiana Pacers. And they're in the finals. They're awaiting the Western Conference final winner between the Mavericks and the Timberwolves. And, well, it is 3-0 Dallas right now. But as we speak, it is tied at halftime. If the Timberwolves have some type of magic left in them, they could somehow do this. But I think it's safe to say that they will be facing the Dallas Mavericks. Ed, how are you feeling about Boston being there? Does it make complete sense because of the team they have?
Well, it's funny that you should bring up the idea of the yellow brick road because in those yellow jerseys that the Pacers wear, they just walked all over them. It was just straight through it. It's what you expected if this was a 1-8 matchup going into the playoffs, not the Eastern Conference Finals. And the fact that the Pacers overextended themselves in the Knicks series, that made them ripe for the picking for the Celtics. But the Celtics are so balanced. They move the ball very well. They set each other up for the shots that they take. And it's not hero basketball, even though they definitely want to put Jason Tatum at the forefront of most everything. They have a very good way of making it somewhat even, and nobody's stepping out so far ahead of everybody else. So it makes them dangerous because you never know where it's coming from.
Yeah, and they're really trying their best to push the whole Tatum is our Batman to Jaylen Brown is his Robin, but stop trying to push things. Stop trying to make fetch work because you could be I don't want to say the Avengers because I'm kind of crossing over from DC to Marvel. You know, you don't have to be a Batman and have a Robin. You could be the entire superhero team. And with Jaylen Brown, how ironic, got the Larry Bird MVP trophy as they beat the Pacers. But Larry Bird also playing a Celtic, it was only fitting that Jaylen Brown got it. But this was Jaylen Brown's series. From game 1 all the way to game 4, this was Jaylen Brown's series as he sealed that game 1 victory as the Pacers really let that slip away. And I think that was pretty much foreshadowing what was going to happen in that series because when I saw the Pacers blow that game 1 lead, I knew that this series was that was their only opportunity to really gain momentum. And at that point, Boston had all the momentum in the world, and they just continued to show their dominance in through the rest of the games, game 2, 3, and 4. But David, do you agree with that comparison that they don't need to have Tatum as their Batman? We know he's a star, but their whole team could be stars, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like what Ed said earlier that Austin does have a well balanced attack. But at the end of the day, you still need your star players to be your star players. And listen, I don't think Jalen Brown winning the MVP was entirely egregious, but I thought he was the wrong choice. I mean, he shot the ball better than Tatum did, but other than that, Tatum averaged more points, more rebounds, more assists, and he also averaged fewer turnovers than Jalen Brown did. So I don't quite understand how Tatum didn't get the award. But as I said before, I don't think Jalen Brown getting it was entirely egregious, as he played very well also.
Yeah, and there's no doubt in my mind, of course, that Jason Tatum is their star. He is their team MVP. But I think of this series, I think Jaylen Brown's playmaking is what made him more of the MVP. He is kind of spotty, where sometimes he shows up big, sometimes he doesn't. Where Tatum, we can almost count on a game, every game basis that he's going to put up those MVP like numbers. So I don't want to take that away either. I just think that Jaylen Brown, what he was able to do, especially on the defensive side of the ball, by applying the pressure against this young squad of the Pacers, really was just too much for them to handle. And so that's why I think Boston really just made this look very easy. And Derek White with that very clutch 3 last night to ultimately win the game for them. Going into this series, I mentioned his name because he's one of those guys that could also be really streaky behind the arc, and he did exactly what he's known for doing and made that really clutch 3-point shot. So Tatum is playing like a star, but this whole team is.
Yeah, and one thing I will say about Jaylen Brown is there's a difference between having more points and having clutch points. Having the moment not be too big for what you're doing. Because we've seen stat fillers all through basketball history, but when it matters the most, who was the guy that took the shot for Jaylen Brown? For them, it was Jaylen Brown. The end of game 1 when the Pacers had that game won. They really did. But their inability to have the fine details buttoned up let the Celtics back in. And when you get somebody that shuts the door when on the other team, when you should have lost, that is clutch. And that is part of the reason why they gave Jaylen Brown that MVP trophy for this series, as short as it was.
Yeah, Ed, I mentioned after game 1 that it felt like the momentum really obviously swung, and it was the only thing the Pacers probably could have done that would have helped them win this series. Well, to make matters worse, after game 2, Halliburton was gone, and without him, it made it even more harder
And
for the Pacers.
and look at that. Once again, the Celtics are facing a team missing its star player or one of its star players.
Yeah, we saw it the series before with the Cavs.
Yep.
It was all injuries for the
No
Cavs.
Jared Allen, and then they faced a Miami Heat team that had no Jimmy Butler.
So, as I was insinuating, the yellow brick road and their what it took for them to get there, but I do not want that to overshadow this Boston Celtics team. This could be the closest that Al Horford is going to win his first NBA Finals. I mean, Al Horford being in the league for, gosh, it seems like forever, and being with that Atlanta Hawks team. And guys, that Atlanta Hawks team, I remember them like it was yesterday. Al Horford, Josh Smith, Jamal Crawford, and you would have thought that team was going to win something, but they didn't. I mean, they had that one great year and couldn't win it. Now, Al Horford, he did make it to the finals for them just a couple years ago when they lost to Golden State. Can this finally be the year that Al Horford gets his first ring?
Well, I know hindsight is 2020, but looking back, I mean, that Hawks team never had a prayer of a chance because, I mean, yes, balanced scoring is great, but the problem was that team didn't have a go-to scorer, and it bit them in the ass. And listen, I said this before. and I'm low key pulling for the Celtics. Okay, I really want to see Al Horford win a ring because he doesn't have a lot of years left in him after this.
Yeah, no, not much at all. And Ed, I want to read you off these headlines here from NBA.com, and I
Okay.
want you to get your opinion, just kind of what you think of when you hear these. So NBA.com, this is their top 5 headlines when it comes to this, and headline number 1 is more clutch success for the Celtics. Number 2, Celtics halt the Pacers' potent offense down the stretch. Number 3, Celtics keep playing the mismatch game. And number 4, Celtics should be fresh and whole for the finals. And last but not least, number 5, Pacers' unexpected playoff run comes to an end. And is this kind of circle back to what we're saying, that injuries is that why that offense, was held down the stretch? Celtics keep playing the mismatch game. Is that pretty much exactly what we're saying? What do you feel when you hear these headlines?
So when I see these headlines, I go furthest out time wise and work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
The furthest out time wise is the fact that the Celtics will have 9 days to rest before the finals begin. So all those nagging injuries, all those tired legs, those can all be somewhat fixed and rejuvenated going into the finals. With the end of the series, yes, the Pacers' run came to an end. And like I said before, their details weren't buttoned up. They're still a young squad. They are very potent on offense, but they are not very potent on defense. We've mentioned that several times here. And going into this next season, that then becomes a priority for them to look at those things and get better on that side of the ball. Because working together in congruency in that offensive system, they learned how to do that, how to do it on the other end of the court. That was their big bugaboo. And maybe the biggest reason why we all expected this going into this series. Because I think all 3 of us had the Celtics in a fairly short series because the Pacers couldn't stop a bicycle, without a rider coming down the road. It's just they couldn't do anything. And the way the Celtics attacked them was to get Tatum and and Brown on mismatched switch offs to get themselves open and really take advantage of the youth and that inability to play defense by the Pacers. So working all through that, and then you add those clutch moments like game 1. This was very much like a Thanos moment, since we're talking comic book characters this time, where they where the Celtics had become inevitable, and there was nothing the Pacers could do about it.
Yeah, there really wasn't, and I'm so glad you brought up the 9 games between, because that is important to talk about, because this is really going to benefit the Celtics, because let's just say hypothetically the Mavericks do win this series, because all signs are pretty much pointing towards that. The Mavericks won't have that hype. They won't have that momentum they're having right now, because eventually it's going to die down, and that's going to be the Mavericks' kryptonite, in my opinion. This Celtics team, the way they're built, is built for to have this rest, because they're still a great team, and I don't want to disregard what the Mavericks are doing right now, but I just think that the Mavericks, they found their mojo, but I think that if they win, say tonight, and they have this long rest, it's only going to hurt them more. That's just my opinion, because of what I've seen them doing. They really need that momentum. Whereas, let's say Minnesota has the Minnesota miraculous comeback, they would then have that momentum going in, because at that point at the end of this series, we'll then go right into the finals. And that could really play as a strong suit for a young Anthony Edwards in that Minnesota team.
Well, and yeah, the other thing too is that a lot of times in the NBA, really any any sport period is that a lot of times it just simply comes down to not necessarily who the best team is, but who the hottest team is. And I would argue that no team has been hotter in the NBA than the Dallas Mavericks since around early March.
Yeah, that is a great words to say, is that they are the hottest team right now.
And what
Yeah,
I
so
would
that's
say on as far as the time frame that you're talking, Matthew, is there's a definite difference between rest versus rust.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about a team that was 12 games better than everybody else in the NBA versus a team that is riding momentum, that team that was 12 games better, they can turn it on. They are good enough to be able to just, okay, we're done resting now. Let's go. Whereas a team that is riding its momentum, they've got to keep riding that momentum. They've got to keep riding that that emotional high, that adrenaline, to keep them engaged the way that they need to be. Whereas a team like the Celtics, they can have those 9 days off and it's not going to affect them nearly the same way.
We've heard the rest versus rust conversation for so many years on so many sports, and the comparisons that we get for for the rest or against the rest. At the end of the day, it's how great do you have your team built up for this, or is this a champion caliber team? Because if it is, then there's no excuses. And I honestly think that this Boston Celtics team is a championship caliber team, even though they did play in a very, very weak East Coast this year and did kind of pretty much skate through the playoffs unscathed. So I think that is something to point out, but I think that Boston is built for this championship, and they'll be ready come finals, no matter who they play. But to talk more about the NBA, this last weekend we did lose an all-time great, Bill Walton. He had been around for so many years, coming from UCLA, being on Portland. Uh, he has so many memories that he has left in the NBA. I can't even tell you how many I remember, because Bill Walton, to me, I grew up listening to him, always talking about the Grateful Dead. It seemed like he may or may not have brought up a couple different trees, but Bill Walton was an all-time great. His son Luke Walton being in the NBA as well, but Bill Walton, to me, is going to be very missed. And I'll be completely honest, this did catch me off guard, because I had no clue he had cancer. I don't know if they kept it quiet, or maybe I just was not paying much attention to it, but just very sad. And thoughts and prayers go out to the Walton family as they go through this. It is never easy losing a loved one, but thoughts and prayers out to the Walton family. And I'm sure you guys also have many fond memories when it comes to Bill Walton and his legacy that will be carried on.
Oh yeah, like the best part about Bill Walton is just every game he would tell these like very weird, absurd stories, and then his partner, who I can't remember his name, but like Bill Walton would tell these very weird, entertaining, absurd stories, and then his partner would follow it up with, and Arizona State takes a timeout now.
Yeah, those broadcasts really did at sometimes feel like they were more about him than they were the game. But that is a product of Bill Walton is one of those people in all sports that is unapologetically himself, and there is nobody that's going to tell him to be or act or say otherwise. And that's the way he's always been. Now, as far as his playing career, you really have to go back to his time at UCLA to really show his dominance. Because when he got into the NBA, he really only had 3 good years before foot injuries became a thing, and he just kind of battled back. And he did wind up on one of the best teams of all time at that time, and that was the '86 Celtics, where he was the backup to Robert Parrish, which having those two on the together on a team, add Kevin McHale, add Larry Bird, add Dennis Johnson, add Danny Ainge. That was a very potent team. I believe they only lost 15 games that year, one of them at home. And he's really known to be one of those guys that will do anything to get the job done, even so much as throwing a shoe at a ball to block it. There's so many things like that, but it was never just about basketball with Bill Walton. It was about the life stages, because he definitely being a disciple of John Wooden. And John Wooden wasn't somebody that talked about basketball day to day to day. He talked about life day to day to day. One of the nuggets that has been shared so many times, and I'll go ahead and share it here as well. Happiness begins when selfishness ends. And you take that to a basketball team, you will find success with that team once everybody buys into that model just by itself, let alone the thousand other things that John Wooden had to pass along to his players.
Yeah, John Wooden, definitely a coach to play for. But if you've never watched Bill Walton play at UCLA, I urge you to watch. I mean, after he passed away, ESPN did have it might have been the 30 for 30, but of the UCLA team that Bill Walton played on, and you got to see a different Bill Walton that maybe you're used to. I mean, Bill Walton was a great player at UCLA, so I urge you to watch that. And one of my all-time favorite memories will be, if you've watched college basketball and you look at the Oregon Ducks basketball court, it is some people like it, some people don't.
It's very unique.
But just picture that and picture Bill Walton seeing it. And if you listen to the commentary of Bill Walton when he just talks about this court, it's pure comedy, and I love it because that's who Bill Walton is, and he'll be remembered as because of his commentary. So yeah.
And I think it was you, Matthew. I think it was you, Matthew, who mentioned that a lot of the times he just made it about himself, but also like that's why people loved him. I mean, I'm sure there were times when I was watching a Pac-12 game, didn't give two shits about the teams that were playing. I just wanted to hear what Bill Walton had to say.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to hear what Bill Walton had to say because sometimes it just made the game better. I mean, if you've watched some of these Pac-12 games, they're not even close. They aren't. I mean, the same thing can be said with football. And just watching them, just to listen to him, just really made things a lot better. So, yeah. But yeah, Bill Walton, unfortunately, may he rest in peace. And like I said, thoughts and prayers go out to his family, the Walton family, and everyone else that was close to Bill Walton. But at this time, I want to shift over to the NHL. We actually have a guest on right now that is going to help us cover the NHL and the Western Conference Finals. And no bias, but their team is the Edmonton Oilers, and our guest today is none other than Quade Aikens. Quade, how's it going today?
Very good. Yourselves?
Oh, it's going great. We're glad to have you on.
Man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're officially our second guest all time.
Awesome.
It's quite the honor, Quade. Quite the honor. So Dallas Stars are up 2-1 against your Edmonton Oilers right now. I know David has several questions for you, which I will let him get to, but I kind of want to start out and ask you the obvious question here is, what does the Oilers have to do to overcome this deficit to eventually make it to the Stanley Cup final?
Well, the biggest thing that Edmonton has to do right now is forget entirely about that second period in the game last night. That if you play like that, you will lose every game in the NHL. That was the worst period I have seen an NHL team play in the playoffs in a long time. There's no reason a team with McDavid, with Draisaitl, with Zach Hyman, with Evan Bouchard, Matthias Ekholm. You went almost 17 minutes without getting a shot on net and left your goalie out to dry. So you need to button things down defensively. You need to play a sound game. Give Stuart Skinner some help. He played really good despite what his save percentage numbers were yesterday. And you need to find some help from guys down in the lineup. You need Dylan Holloway to score. You need Evander Kane to score. You need some of the guys who are not the 5 players who play on the power play right now to get some points, because Edmonton only has 5 players with over half a point a game right now at this point in the playoffs. It's just not good enough. Give the Stars their flowers. I think they're the best team in the league this year. I think Ottinger is finally playing up to his potential as a top 4 or 5 goalie in the league. He had a mediocre regular season, and having Rupe Hintz back, that is a massive add. It's going to be hard to beat Dallas. They are a great team.
Yeah, it definitely give them their flowers. But yeah, David, go ahead and ask your question here to Quaid.
Yeah, Quaid, one of the players that you mentioned was Leon Draisaitl, and I just want to know, because the first 2 rounds, Draisaitl was on fire. He was scoring. He was playing great from the faceoff circle. Well, now so far in the Western Conference Finals, he has just 1 point, and that was that 1 goal in Game 1. He's been held pointless since. I mentioned the faceoff circle before. The first 3 rounds, he was, I think, 53% from the faceoff circle. He's been 42% from the faceoff circle in the Western Conference Finals so far. So, is he dealing with any nagging injuries? Is it just a matter of him going up against better competition? What has been up with Draisaitl in the conference finals?
Definitely, the competition does play a factor in it. Dallas is a much better team. Vancouver's a good team. They had big defensemen. Dallas has mobile defensemen that aren't necessarily as big, but they play hard, and they've got a very good forward group that plays well defensively. As for injuries, officially no, but this is the NHL. Everyone's got an injury at this point in time. Draisaitl missed half of the game. I think it was Game 1 of the second round against Vancouver. They claimed cramps. I had heard on a couple of the Edmonton shows that it could possibly be a broken rib that he's dealing with. So he is playing a little beat up. So is McDavid. The caveat is it's the NHL playoffs. Everyone's got an injury. No one's 100%. You got to power through. Draisaitl's played fine this round. He's not getting the results. I think a lot of it is his line's producing chances. They're not getting anything in the net. I do think Edmonton's defense, particularly the Darnell Nurse-Cody Ceci pairing, has just not been good enough, and the play dies on their sticks. Darnell Nurse, Frank Saravalli with the Daily Face-Off put out a news article today. Darnell Nurse is minus 12 in the playoffs, which is worse than the 3 worst players on the teams left combined.
Wow.
And he is a $9.25 million defenseman that's not he's got 2 points in the playoffs, and he's one of the highest paid defensemen in the league. Not good enough. Draisaitl's definitely got an injury. The severity of it we won't know until after playoffs, unfortunately. And it's just a matter of him and his line mates have to be able to finish when given the opportunity, and so does he. Draisaitl's also a big power play guy, and when you're not getting anything on the power play, that's going to hamper your scoring as well.
Wait, I have a question, and I'm going to switch it to the Star side if you don't mind. You mentioned Hintz coming back from his injury. Does him coming back last night just put the lines back in the place where they should be, rather than mixing and matching while he's been out, and that continuity going back into place just really get a lot more confidence for Jason Robertson to show what he's really all about, as opposed to what he's shown so far in the playoff?
Oh, it's a massive add, and Dallas was already probably the deepest team. They run 4 lines deep. Their third line is at worse a second line on almost every other team in the NHL. Their forward group is, when you've got Tyler Seguin, who's a second overall pick, playing third line center, that's a very deep team. And adding Rupe Hintz, who I would compare him a lot to a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in that you might not think right off the bat that this guy's really important, but when you take him out of the lineup, things don't work. There's just something off. And it's that chemistry that he has with Jason Robertson. Jason Robertson's got 36 goals now, I guess 39 goals with Rupe in the lineup, and only 3 assists with him out of the lineup. So, yeah, the lines go back. It makes you deeper. It makes it harder for teams to defend because now you're going up against third, fourth line guys, and you've still got an excellent line with bona fide star power on it.
Yeah, and Quaid, I also want to ask you, with the Oilers making it to the Western Conference Finals is already a great accomplishment alone, and it's not the only time recently that they have done that. But this series is long from over. But if they are not able to make it to the finals, what can they do to get over this hump to get them to the finals in years to come?
So it seems like it's a good accomplishment. The team was very clear after last year. It's cup or bust for this team. If you do not win the cup, it is a wasted year. This is year 9 of the McDavid tenure. Yeah, the Stanley Cup's the hardest trophy in sports to win. They are going to have to take a serious look at Darnell Nurse. He has not been good enough this season or this playoffs. He has a full no-move clause, so your only option would be a buyout. That's a lot of money, and that's going to screw you a few years down the line to do it. Edmonton's Jack Campbell, our supposed number one goalie that we signed a few years back for $5 million a year, will be bought out this summer. I would bet the farm on that. They're going to need to focus on getting some depth scoring, which has long been the plague of the team. I like Stuart Skinner. He's a hometown boy. He grew up in Edmonton. He grew up watching the team. Overall, in the playoffs, he hasn't been good enough, so Edmonton's going to need to find some improvements on goal. And unless Darnell Nurse has a massive comeback next year, you're going to need help on defense as well. So there's some serious holes on this team that having the best player in the world and arguably the second best player in the world helps plug. But you look at a Stars team, the Stars are a better team. Edmonton has a puncher's chance to get through it, and they're going to have to buckle down. So
I wanted to ask, and we might have time for just maybe 1 or 2 more questions, but at least for me, I got one more question. Quaid, in a lot of ways, the Oilers kind of remind me of, the Washington Capitals, because, the Washington Capitals had the star player in Ovechkin, but they could never get over the hump. Obviously, there's some clear differences. The Oilers have at least been able to make it to the conference finals a couple of times, whereas with the Capitals, they didn't make it past the second round in the Ovechkin era until they finally, won it all. But you look at a team like the Capitals, and it's like every single year they had all these great expectations, and they just failed oh so spectacularly to live up to them. And then the one year where nobody expects them to do anything at all, the one year where they're supposed to, have a rebuilding year or whatever, that's when they win it all. Do you foresee a similar situation to with the Edmonton Oilers, where it's like maybe the one year when nobody actually gives a crap about them, the one year when they're supposed to be going through rebuilding, that's the one year that they finally do win it all, funny enough?
The problem is you have, as long as they have McDavid and Draisaitl, they're always going to be a favorite pick to win the cup because those two players are just that good. I do see some similarities. Edmonton has lost to the Stanley Cup champions the last 2 years. And while we've made it to the conference final 2 of the last 3 years, we have 1 win to show for it in those 2 years so far. So it's all good to make it. When you get swept by a Colorado team that was obviously better than you, and you give up a lead in all 6 games the next year to a Vegas team that was the Cup final. Whichever team won that series was going to go on to win the Cup. And Edmonton gave up leads in each of those games. Edmonton's problem is they beat themselves. They showed that last night with their second period. Give the Stars their credit. They came out and pushed, and the Oilers rolled over and died. And they have a tendency to do that. But they're always going to be a favorite to win it as long as you have McDavid and Draisaitl, because they're just that good. And while hockey is the ultimate team sport, your best player only plays 20 minutes a game. People are still going to put money on Edmonton so long as you have the best player in the world.
You're 100% right. Ed, do you have any other questions for Quaid before we let him go?
Actually, I wanted to ask you just kind of overall something I've noticed in Stanley Cup playoffs, and this has been an ongoing thing. These teams will work throughout the year to get home ice advantage, but yet it means absolutely nothing when it gets to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Are you seeing this trend continue on? Is there a major reason to really push for these top-seeded positions if there is no such thing as a home ice advantage and getting to the Stanley Cup finals?
There is a home ice advantage. It definitely is not necessarily as pronounced, but if you watched the game last night, the crowd did everything to help Edmonton out, and they gave Edmonton life in the first period. So Dallas is the best road team in the NHL this year. The Florida Panthers Rangers series, I know as we're recording this, it's 15 minutes left in the third period. That's currently tied 2-2 right now. Hockey is very difficult to build momentum, and the momentum swings can be very quickly and very drastic. But you always want to play in front of your home fans, I think. But one of the things what the NHL has is you play every other night. When you're on the road, you're with the team. You don't have that added distraction of having your families and having to host people who are wanting to come see the game, come see you while you're at the game. You're in the hotel, you watch your tape, you go to practice, you go to the game. It's a much simpler thing that while the players, you always want to sleep in your own bed, but it's nice to not have the distractions that come with being on home ice, especially in a hockey mad market like Edmonton that compares to the SEC college football in terms of passion.
Yeah, no, Quaid is absolutely right. Momentum in the NHL is very similar to pretty much my weather here in Ohio. You blink and the weather can change. I can't tell you, I've lost count already in the playoffs where on shorthanded goals so far. I mean, there was almost one tonight in the Rangers game. Where you have a power play, you are expecting all the momentum to be on your side. And in this NHL playoffs, that means absolutely nothing because, like I said, I've lost count on how many shorthanded goals there's been in this Stanley Cup playoffs alone. So momentum is a huge thing, but it can swing just like that. So you're absolutely right there, Quaid. But Quaid, we really appreciate you being on today. Not to put you on the spot, but I mean, Twitter. Can people find you on Twitter? Where can they find you if they want more hockey insight?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is at Quaid QUAIDER16, and that's where you can find me on Twitter. It's the only social media that I use. I don't use anything else, so that's where you'll get all of my trash takes when I'm too invested in watching my team play. But you might learn something, or you might get a laugh. So,
hey,
Yeah.
why not both, Quaid? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But
we appreciate you coming on, man. Really.
I appreciate you guys having me. I'm happy to come back on anytime you want. So
yeah, we hope to have you on. Hopefully, if the Oilers make it. So stay tuned.
Your mouth to God's ears. So,
Yep. All right. Thank you, Quay. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Quaid.
have a good one.
Well, that was awesome, guys. Quaid, great guy, fan of the show and fan of hockey. So we really are glad that he was able to come on today. So thank you again, Quaid, for that. NHL playoffs is alive and well, but his Edmonton Oilers will have a lot to do to overcome a 2-1 deficit, as we already talked about Dallas Stars being the best road team. Not only in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but in the NHL. They are just that good on the road, and they are a very heavy team from top to bottom. So continue to pay attention to that series there. Any more you guys want to talk about when it comes to hockey, Stanley Cup playoffs, as he did mention right now as we are speaking, the Rangers and the Panthers are live, and last we heard it was a tied game. So that is a very fun series to keep an eye on.
Well, what I want to know is, and Matthew, like you and I were kind of talking about this before this episode, but Ed, I'm bringing it up to you for the first time. But guys, are we really going to get a Stanley Cup Finals between two of the number one seeded teams? Like that just doesn't ever happen in hockey.
Very rare. Very rare.
Yeah.
It is very rare. And it's definitely a possibility. I mean, both series right now, the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, are somewhat even. I mean, 2-1 is not that large of a deficit to overcome, but it's still a deficit. It's still got a lot of game time to play. And, we just have to see where that takes us at this point.
And like what's really interesting too is that, and I've mentioned it before, but the last time that a team won the President's Trophy in a full 82 game season and made it to the finals in the same year was the Vancouver Canucks back in 2010, 2011. I mean, no disrespect to the Rangers. They won the President's Trophy, so obviously they're a great team, but it's like you look at the teams in the past that have won the President's Trophy, like the Tampa Bay Lightning when we won 62 games, the Bruins last year when they won 65 games. Like you look at all these great teams, and you look at the Rangers, and you're wondering, like, okay, how are these guys the ones that won the President's Trophy? How are they the ones that are on the verge of going to the finals, especially when we've seen so many other great President's Trophy winning teams in the past?
I think it's just because they were written off. I mean, going into this year, the talk was, are the Bruins going to repeat the success they had last year in the regular season? And then the postseason is a different game. And we saw what happened last year with the Bruins. So no one was even talking about the Rangers. And the Rangers having one of the top power play games in the game is something that needs to be talked about. And we've talked about it on this show, but almost the resurgence of Igor Shesterkin in the net is also a big thing too. That's really gotten them there. Goalie play is key in Stanley Cups, and that's why Quaid also brought up Ottinger, because when you have a solid goalie game, you just hope that your guys can bail you out on the scoring part of it. So
Absolutely.
I think that's just something that they kind of were a little under the radar, but this Rangers team compared to the others is a big difference.
And something I'm noticing in the Western Conference a little more than the Eastern Conference is you see more teams committed to that shell around the goalie that keeps pressure off of them, as opposed to on the Eastern Conference, I'm seeing a little more wide open game. I'm seeing a little more attack down the ice, that fire quickly, fire at all costs, get it going, always moving type of game. And those games are great until they come up against a wall that is not letting those movements happen. And that's kind of where I see Boston from a couple years ago when they had all those records for their for the regular season, but then flamed out in the playoffs. You see that again, with who was it? I'm trying to remember. Either way, the point I'm making is it's the immovable object versus the irresistible force. And in hockey, I'm seeing the immovable object win out more often than that irresistible force. And that's just and but in the regular season, the offense is what is winning all these games and getting all these points. So that's why I'm seeing uh, the difference between these President's Cup trophy winners not making it to the final.
Yeah, and I guess to be fair, I mean, I think we talked before about how we didn't even know who was going to win the President's Trophy. Like the race was just so wide open, and the Rangers won it on like the last game or so.
Yeah, it came down. I think the second to last game was right around there, so it
Yeah.
was tight the entire way. So by no means was it like the Boston Celtics in the East.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, like you mentioned, a Boston team, and we know the Bruins just completely destroyed everybody last year.
Boy, did they!
Yeah.
Boston had something in their water, I'm guessing. But so maybe the Celtics got it this year, but they actually have the success in the playoffs, unlike the Bruins.
Oh yeah.
So we also had news of Angel Hernandez of the Major League Baseball retiring this last weekend. And is it safe to say that we not only are celebrating, but we all have the same memory when it comes to Angel Hernandez?
Listen, actually, Ed, you go first. I'll go after you.
The memory that I have of Angel Hernandez is the consistently being this far off the strike zone and calls over and over and over again. I did go down a little bit of a rabbit hole looking at some of his history, and the one that still kills me is the 3 overturned calls in the 2018 playoffs in the first inning. How in the world do you have 3 plays overturned that you called as a playoff ump get overturned in the first freaking inning? That is ridiculous. He should have been dragged off the field at that point. But he was so embattled in these court things, saying that he was being singled out, and it's just dumber than anything.
Well, it's funny because like didn't he try to sue the MLB for racism, saying that like they're not letting me ump the playoff games because of racism, and then they hit back with, "No, dude, you just suck ass at your job."
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the exact point. And when we eventually baseball is going to go to robot umps. Let's just put it out there. It's going to happen. As much as purists like me who still want the old National League versus the new National League, all that stuff, as much as us old guys hate it, it's going to happen. And I'm not too mad at it, but I have a suggestion. Can we just call it the Angel Rule by having the robot umps? Because they're going to be in there to fix what Angel Hernandez broke.
Yeah. Well, I have a conspiracy theory, in that I'm convinced that Angel knew he was bad at his job, but that he was bad intentionally, because there is no way on God's good green earth that you can be that bad for that long and not be aware of how bad you are. I think Angel was that bad for so long intentionally because I think he was trying to prove the point that MLB was never going to do anything about him, and he was right. I mean, the closest thing that they did was not allow him to ump in the in the postseason. But beyond that, I really believe that Angel was secretly proving the point to, hey, listen, MLB, I know I suck at my job. You know I suck, but we all know you're not going to do anything. So,
Yeah, it's he is exactly why essentially these robot umps are even being talked about. And yeah, his strike zones, catchers didn't even have to frame. There was no point because he was still probably going to call it a strike with it being so far off the plate. That's just how atrocious he is. And it's like being a meteorologist. you could do everything wrong and still have job security. Well, that was Angel Hernandez pretty much his entire career. His mistake after mistake. And yes, Ed, I'm glad you brought up the example of that playoff game, because that's peak low. I mean, that's embarrassing to have 3 overturned calls all in one inning, not just one game, one inning. Yes, we are human, but unfortunately with him, he has pretty much made the case for robot umps because of his umpiring.
And he absolutely had zero sense of humor about whether or not he was right or not. You did any, because I remember, Weeb Eubank, Sparky Anderson, Jim Leland, all coming out of the dugout to argue with umpires on anything and everything. And you know what? By the end of it, you realize these guys actually like each other. They're going to go have a beer later after the game, but this is just a terrible situation right now. Whereas Angel Hernandez, was this the same guy that threw out the organist for playing Three Blind Mice? I mean, this guy had just the quickest trigger of any umpire I've ever seen. He tried to throw out pitchers before games started. He tried to throw out people that had nothing to do with the actual game itself, and had no ability to take levity of a situation, because he was so much about making the game about himself more than the game itself. And that to me, I think, is the reason why people just hate him so badly.
And listen, like, I think most of the time, it doesn't have to be like for every case or whatever, but in my opinion, most of the time, if you're an umpire and you're famous, that's a bad thing. Because as an umpire, it should be boring for you, right? Like, it should just be boring. You're just there to do your job, make the calls, make the strikes. You might have a screw up here or there, but that's okay. You're human. For the most part, you're just there to do your job, okay? If you're actually famous as an umpire, that means that you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. You hit the nail right on the coffin there. And Angel Hernandez, he will not be missed. He was one of those that just had that chip on his shoulder going into the game and never let it go. He just always had that chip on his shoulder. And you look up that in the dictionary, his picture is probably next to it. So
I do want to add one more final thing. I saw this hysterical tweet from I think it's the account Tony X. Basically said that Angel Hernandez is blind. He probably meant to sign a contract extension and accidentally signed his retirement papers instead.
And would you be surprised if it happened?
No.
I'm pretty sure he would argue that it was not a valid contract because he missed a line.
Yeah. On to the NFL. The Houston Texans, they're building something great there. And although they did pick up Stephon Diggs in the offseason, they want to continue to reward their homegrown talent, we'll say. And Nico Collins was awarded with a 3-year, $72 million extension. And this is big for them because they've got such a great young wide receiver core. With Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Now you have Stephon Diggs, who will be the seasoned vet. Are they building something really strong there, would you guys say, on their offense?
I think they definitely have a case. I can't, and I'll make this very brief. I cannot say, at least not yet, I cannot say that they have an offense that's going to, I can't say that they're going to run the AFC South, because I said the same thing about the Jaguars, and then look what happened with them. So I have to see some consistency from the Texans. You might disagree with that, and I wholeheartedly respect that, but I cannot say in good conscience that they're going to run this division. But certainly they have the potential to do so, especially with the offense that they have right now.
When we're talking about having a core to run a division, how long are you talking about? Because with the way the NFL is set up at this point, a core that can run a division is maybe at max 3 years versus however many years we saw the Patriots do it. They did it by not having a core. They had a guy, and a guy that was willing to take less money so the team would have that excess capital to get the defensive players because they knew they needed the defensive players, not just flashy offensive guys.
Well, and that's fair. And I was kind of thinking that same time frame, Ed. But I would also kind of define it as like, okay, who is the one team in this division where this is clearly their division to lose? I would add that to the definition of like, what does it mean to run a division? It's not just winning it, but like every single year, who is the one team where okay, this is clearly their division to lose?
Yeah. Well, the Jaguars were going to be it.
Yeah.
But somehow that got derailed, and I have no idea what happened there. Everything seemed to line up, but here comes Houston, and Houston is like, no, we're in this now, and we're going to run this. So y'all just step aside.
Yeah.
But at this point, we're going to have Jacksonville, try and make a case for themselves this upcoming year.
Yeah, Houston came in and said, "I'm the captain now." That's essentially really what they did. So, but I want to talk about more on the numbers here and what this means, because this is a lucrative deal. This is big. A 3-year extension for $72 million, 52 guaranteed. I want to say it's a $17 million signing bonus, but this is Nico Collins we're talking about. This isn't like a CD Lamb. This isn't, a big-time wide receiver here. And this is no disrespect to Nico Collins, but what does this do for some of the big receivers out there that have yet to sign their extensions? The T. Higgins that we talked about that's holding out, the CD Lambs. I mean, this is a pretty big deal for a player who may be their second or third best receiver on the team.
I think this just locks him in to be that second receiver and possibly develop into the number one slot as they get through Stephon Diggs. Because I don't expect Stephon Diggs to be there more than a year, maybe 2. So they are going to still have Nico Collins at that time, and they're making him comfortable so he can put his best foot forward in that offense and see how well that organization is going to take care of him and possibly stay with that organization, use it as a bargaining chip into the next contract.
Yeah, well, you look at a guy like T. Higgins who's looking for a big-time extension, big-time contract, and he's getting $21 million should he sign the franchise tag, but he's feeling like he deserves more than that and a big extension. But Nico Collins here, is he a T. Higgins to you? I mean, is this a similar contract that T. Higgins should be getting?
I'm going to say no. T. Higgins, his success has been predicated on the fact that Jamar Chase is on the other side of the field. Nico Collins was the main target for C.J. Stroud this past season, and they're rewarding him for that.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't have one of the top 5 receivers on the other side freeing him up to fill the stat sheet as T. Higgins did. Nico Collins filled that stat sheet on his own without having somebody take away from the pressure that would be put on him through the season. Would you agree with that, David?
I do, and also for what it's worth, and I don't know, like maybe he has, and this is just a genuine question, but has Nico Collins, like T. Higgins, has he also like set out OTAs the past couple of off seasons?
No.
So there you go. So he's been producing and he's been showing up to work, and what happens? He gets rewarded for it. So good for him.
As you should. I do feel like though this can hurt other teams because of it being a little bit higher, but Nico Collins deserves that because of the hard work he's put in. But players like a CD Lamb and possibly a T. Higgins, after that Calvin Ridley contract that he got this offseason, it's only driving the numbers up.
What team is Ridley on again? Not the Jaguars, right?
The Titans now, if I
That's
remember.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tennessee.
So stayed in the same division, but he's with the Titans now, where he got that wide receiver one contract he was looking for, and a lot of other teams were not willing to do that, but the Titans were.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, Nico Collins, good for him. Good for this Houston Texans team. I'm very interested to see if they could do it 2 years in a row, because that's how you prove, the doubters and the haters wrong, that it is not just a fluke. You are here to stay. You are the captain now. So, Houston, it's up to you now. But that is about all we have today, folks. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate, once again, Quade Aikens for coming in. Feel free to follow him, guys, on Twitter. I know he's got a lot of great insight on hockey, as well as David does. So go ahead and follow him and continue to share and subscribe and like these videos. It really helps us out. And drop in the comments your predictions, your opinions, your thoughts, because we are all entitled to our own opinions. So we are interested to hear what you guys have to say when it comes to the NBA, NHL playoffs, MLB. Shoot, maybe you think there's a worse umpire out there. I'm all ears. But for now, it's Angel Hernandez to us. So, but we appreciate you guys for at least chiming in when it comes to that. But until next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.